but right now it's the outsider's guide to the death of American universities. And if you thought wokeness could not get any more ridiculous, you'd be wrong. In fact, US universities are now so woke, so politically correct, that they've adopted the worst aspects of China's cultural revolution.
As author Rod Dreher revealed this week, Northwestern University staff at an online meeting recently began this forum by denouncing themselves as racist. From the interim dean of Northwestern University Law School came this confession, and I quote, "I'm Jim Speter and I am a racist." As one person lamented, Professor Speter is not racist. He is a wonderful man, universally loved by students. It makes me sad when he was forced to say otherwise.
This from another. My name is Emily Mullen. I am a racist and a gatekeeper of white supremacy. I will work to be better. And lastly, thank you all so much. My name is Sarah Summervold, and I'm a racist. I will try to do much better. These are the same people, scarily, who presumably teach the American Constitution, which has in its things like, Congress is prohibited from passing bills of attainder, which is a legislative act declaring that a person is guilty of a crime and setting punishment without the benefit of a formal trial. I doubt the irony has even occurred to them, but if it has, it's reconciled with Orwellian doublethink.
And what about George Washington University's Professor of African American Studies, Jessica Krug?
Particularly, I'm interested in thinking about this idea that I'm borrowing from Puerto Rican sociologist Isar Godreau, talking about folklorization of blackness, right? But the folklorization particularly of resistance and fugitivity. Folklorization?
What? Actually, I think she might have meant falsification of blackness.
But now Jessica Krug has revealed she lied. She is, in fact, white and from Kansas City. The associate professor at George Washington University had claimed African and Latina heritage. In her confession blog online, she said her deception was rooted in mental health issues as a child. She wrote, "I have built my life on a violent anti-black lie, and I have lied in every breath I have taken. I am not a culture vulture. I am a culture leech."
As the New York Post put it, it was a case of pigment of her imagination. She's now been dubbed Rachel Dolezal 2.0, former academic, National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People chapter president, who you might remember from a few years ago.
Negative and terrorizing scenario, especially death threats and photos of lynchings. And as a Black Studies professor, I know what these images mean and take them very seriously given the history of racism in the United States.
Is that your dad?
Yeah, that's my dad.
This man right here is your father? Right there?
You have a question about that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I was wondering if your dad really is an African-American man.
That's a very, I don't know what you're implying.
Are you African-American?
I don't understand the question of, I did tell you that, yes, that's my dad. And he was unable to come in January.
Are your parents, are they white?
You would think that after being caught out like that, you'd never show your face in public again. But oh no, a couple of years later, Rachel was back to launch her book in full colour, Finding My Place in a Black and White World.
I know last time, I think the term transracial, trans-black was discussed. Right. How do you define, do those terms come into the way you define yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there are too few people that we don't have a vocabulary to really express racial fluidity.
Actually, we do have a term for the likes of you and Jessica Krug, Rachel Dolezal, but we won't repeat it here. Instead, let's go to Park School in Baltimore, which is an institution founded by the Jewish community over 100 years ago that markets itself as, quote, a non-sectarian, independent, gender-inclusive day school for children in pre-kindergarten through grade 12 with, quote, a fundamental commitment to inclusiveness and equity.
Now, remember that definition. Park School has fallen foul of the Black Lives Matter movement, which has this week accused it of promoting anti-blackness and anti-black violence and demanded an examination of Park's history, its inception, its early exclusions, culture of whiteness, and wealth hoarding, its tolerance of Zionism, and its parasitic relationship to Baltimore City.
Well, they're right in one sense. Park School's founding had everything to do with bigotry. That is, fighting bigotry against Jews who in the early 20th century were excluded from Baltimore's private schools. Incredibly, officials from the school reportedly said they were working with Black Lives Matter to implement a series of reforms, including changes to diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives. Did it occur to them that anti-Semitism is prevalent in the Black Lives Matter movement, or that some in the movement have embraced Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan?
And this week, Christian Broadcasting News reported on a so-called, quote, Moral Foundations questionnaire that was presented to students at Appalachian State University in North Carolina. Here is a sample of some of those questions students were asked to rate along the lines of strongly agree, agree, strongly disagree, or simply disagree.
If a few of the worst Republican politicians were assassinated, it wouldn't be the end of the world, was one question.
Conservatives are morally inferior to liberals, was another question.
Another one read, I am in favor of allowing the government to shut down right-wing internet sites and blogs that promote nutty, hateful positions.
Political violence can be constructive, they said, when it serves the cause of social justice, and they were asked to agree or disagree with that.
The rich should be stripped of their belongings and status.
Oh, and here's another one. I can't imagine myself becoming friends with a political conservative.
And what about this doozy? Deep down, just about all conservatives are racist, sexist, and homophobic. Oh, agree or disagree?
And another one. I would prefer a far-left leader with absolute authority over a far-right leader with limited power.
Oh, my God.
Oh.
Pity they weren't asked to respond to the proposition, I am wasting my valuable time and money in indulging these woke idiots, or anyone who believes this rubbish is in urgent need of a life.
Back in July, the University of California voted to, get this, drop requirements for applicants to take the Scholastic Aptitude Test and the American College Testing Exam. But they still allowed individual campuses to decide whether individual students wanted to submit the results to improve their chances of admission. Guess what? That decision has been taken out of the university's hands.
The University of California system cannot use SAT and ACT test scores for admissions. That's the ruling from a Superior Court judge. The University of California says they respectfully disagree with the court's ruling.
Yes, the court ruled that, quote, non-disabled, economically advantaged and white test takers have an inherent advantage in the testing process. Bad luck, you see, as you've belatedly discovered, wokeness is straight out of Disney's The Sorcerer's Apprentice.
And lastly,
a Syracuse University professor has been placed on administrative leave after reportedly referring to the coronavirus as the Wuhan flu and Chinese Communist Party virus in a class syllabus. Syracuse released a statement reading, the derogatory language used by a professor on his course syllabus is damaging to the learning environment for our students and offensive to Chinese, international, and Asian Americans everywhere.
suspended for telling the truth. Well, Syracuse University, there's only one time-honoured phrase that springs to mind, and that is useful idiots. And James and Rita, how many useless idiots have we seen in American universities now? We see I say this is the death of American university, the death of American higher education, because we are seeing this obsession with racism, sexism, homophobia, wokeness has led to the most hideous corruptions of the intellectual process, James.
Well, that's right. I mean, a couple of thoughts just off the back of all of that. You know, number one, I kind of feel like if there is one tiny silver lining to this whole COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, is that it has finally been the moment when academia in the United States has been brought to a head, the whole crisis within it. The huge amounts of money being spent on administrators who do nothing but go around enforcing these woke propositions, but burrowing into everybody's private lives, you know, running these sort of almost Maoist indoctrination camps and self-criticism sessions. Well, that's all over. The money's gone. Academia has to reinvent itself. That, I think, is, if there's going to be anything good that comes out of it, let all of that stuff from academia go. And after this, let's rebuild a proper university system that actually teaches people things that are useful and beautiful and ennobling.
Well, I wish I could share your optimism, Rita. Honest question, would you allow your child to go and do arts or humanities at an American university now?
Oh, look, he can do it, but he's paying for it himself. It is an absolute waste of time. It's a junk degree. And if you want to do it, it's an indulgence that you pay for yourself. You know, this stuff has been in academia for years. Finally, there's some pushback. Asian Americans, for example, are now fighting back against being systematically discriminated against, because though they're minorities, their academic results are brilliant as an average, and yet they're not being admitted to top schools like Harvard because they don't want to have a disproportionate number of Asian Americans and they want to have greater diversity. Where is the fairness in that? It really is such a toxic, poisonous methodology to govern a university.
Well, there you go, The Outsider's Guide to the Death of the once great American university.